This is Land of Havilah, Ecclesiastes 7. It's a chapter of Proverbs, some short ones that stand alone and some are extended. There's a general negativity to them, a pessimism and a glass-half-empty outlook. Solomon might believe in the goodness of God as a theory, but he's not experiencing that goodness in his soul. It's true that we do live in a miserable and fallen world like Solomon describes it, but if we know God very well, we've already been delivered from many of those evils, and in the hereafter, a hereafter which Solomon didn't expect to ever see, we look for complete deliverance. We'll be delivered from every hangnail on one end of the scale to every grievous affliction on the other. But most of us understand Solomon's point of view because we've been there. He's not wrong in his description of life. There are many evil and objectionable conditions from which we need deliverance. He searched mightily for answers, but as he admits himself, an accumulation of knowledge isn't an answer to the emptiness within, and philosophy isn't the answer. They're helpful maybe, but in the end, what's the use of knowledge, philosophy, or anything else if they don't fill and satisfy us, and if we die and there's nothing more? To Solomon, it's an established fact that nothing under the sun satisfies, but he keeps searching because he suspects he's missing something. He knows about God, but he doesn't feel exultant in God like so many of the other prophets. He's discouraged. But ladies and gentlemen, we can go ahead and exult in God unreservedly because God doesn't disappoint. First comes the faith in that, then the experience of it. And not because we ginned it up. It's not manufactured. It comes by God's supernatural provision. God responds to our faith and fills us. But Solomon, in his current condition, can't see it. Verse 1. A good name is better than fine perfume, and the day of death better than the day of one's birth. Comment Solomon says the day of death is better than the day of birth, almost that he'd be better off if he were dead. But contrast that with Paul, who said he didn't know whether he preferred life or death because to live is Christ and to die gain. Philippians 1:21. Life and death were both good conditions to him. He'd be happy either way. The answer for us isn't just to know about Christ and all the points of Christian doctrine. That's just more information, which is good, but not filling. The answer is to actually experience His presence. His presence fills us. He says to us today, quote, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him and he with me," Revelation 3:20. So please, dear listener, ask Him in, and receive Him by faith. Now back to Solomon, verse 2. It's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for that's the end of all men, and the living should take this to heart. Comment, he says it's better to go to a funeral than a feast, because at a funeral we remember we're all here to die. He's just very negative and depressed. God deliver us from an inability to enjoy ourselves and from a hopeless outlook. Now more of the same, verse 3. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the face the heart is made good. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools in the house of mirth. Comment, he says sorrow is better than laughter because you learn from your sorrow and you don't learn from laughter. Verse 5. It's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Comment, he says it's better to hear correction from a serious person than to party mindlessly with revelers. The laughter at a party is as meaningless as the crackling of a fire. Verse 7. Surely extortion makes the wise man foolish, and a bribe destroys the understanding. Comment, it's not that a bribed judge or congressman consents in his heart to do evil, it's that the bribe makes him blind to evil. Quoting the proverb, a blind destroys the understanding. The congressman will swear up and down he did the right thing because the bribe makes him think he truly did. A bribe blinds, Deuteronomy 16:19, verse 8. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning. The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Comment, it's true that there are many tedious things in life that require patience, and when they're over, good riddance to them. The end of a thing is better than its beginning. The last day of high school is much better than the first day of kindergarten, and so forth. But then again, there are things we thoroughly enjoy that we wish would never end. Verse 9. Don't be hasty in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. Comment, it's foolish to harbor anger and be short-tempered. Verse 10. Don't say, why were the former days better than these, for you do not ask wisely about this. Comment, Solomon says, don't long for the good old days because it's a fallacy that yesterday was any better than today. And as we said when we were in the book of Proverbs, many times a proverb is stated in the form of an absolute, but we're to understand it was meant to express a tendency. They're soft rules, not hard and fast ones. Sometimes it is true that yesterday was better than today, but often the past wasn't as good as we remember it. Verse 11. Wisdom is as good as an inheritance. Yes, it's more excellent for those who see the sun. For wisdom is a defense, even as money is a defense. But the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. Comment, if God comes to you in a dream like he did Solomon, 1 Kings 3:5, and offers you anything you want, take wisdom over money. Wisdom will support you in life better than money. Verse 13. Consider the work of God, for who can make that straight which he's made crooked? Comment, there's some things in life we have no power to change. A metal worker, your narrator knows, was working on the frame of a vehicle, trying to bend it back in shape with his equipment. He was on a shoestring budget and couldn't afford failure, but he couldn't get the metal to act right. He sat down in frustration and prayed, God, please help me out here. Then with an audible thwang, the frame popped in place perfectly straight, as if an angel had thumped it with his finger. God was willing to make that crooked thing straight, but the point of the proverb is that there are some crooked things he won't straighten, meaning objectionable facts about life he won't change, and there's nothing we can do about it. Verse 14. In the day of prosperity be joyful, and in the day of adversity consider, yes, God has made the one side by side with the other, to the end that man should not find out anything after him. Comment, he says, be joyful when something good happens, and when something bad happens, let it remind you bad things can happen again. Life's unpredictable. Be prepared for good and bad. Don't be overly optimistic, in other words. But Solomon could use a dose of optimism himself right now. Now, going on a few verses about the unpredictability of life and how we should handle it, verse 15. All this I've seen in my days of vanity. There's a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there's a wicked man who lives long in his evil doing. Don't be overly righteous, neither make yourself overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Don't be too wicked, neither be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It's good that you should take hold of this. Yes, also from that don't withdraw your hand, for he who fears God will come out of them all. Comment in verses 15 to 18, things are unpredictable. For example, in verse 15, it could be that, contrary to what's expected, a righteous man dies young, and a wicked man lives long. So in verse 16, don't be overly righteous or overly wise, and in verse 17, overly wicked or foolish, probably meaning don't think you have an exact clarity on everything, or you'll destroy yourself. You'll make some wrong assumption and pay for it. And in verse 18, it's good for you that you should take hold of this and don't let go of that, meaning keep all the factors in your mind. Don't forget the facts that contradict your narrative. Fearing God in this way, you'll come out of them all, meaning you'll get through anything. Stay flexible enough to predict a wide range of outcomes, and you'll be able to adapt to whatever comes. As Christians, we know that whatever comes, God will see us through it with victory. Verse 19. Wisdom is a strength to the wise man, more than 10 rulers who are in a city. Comment, one wise man with wisdom is stronger than 10 rulers. Verse 20. Surely there's not a righteous man on earth who does good and doesn't sin. Comment, looking through the works of Solomon, many times he speaks of the righteous and wicked in black and white terms, like one person's absolutely righteous and another absolutely wicked, but we know that's for convenience. He understands in this verse that surely there's no such thing as an absolutely righteous man who doesn't sin. Verse 21. Also, don't take heed to all words that are spoken, lest you hear your servant curse you, for often your own heart knows that you yourself have likewise cursed others. Comment, he says, don't be easily offended or believe everything you hear, because you know how people talk. Half the time they're wrong, sometimes jesting, sometimes having a bad moment, so relax. Don't get upset with them. You say messed up things yourself. Verse 23. All this I have proved in wisdom. I said, I'll be wise, but it was far from me. That which is far off and exceedingly deep. Who can find it out? I turned around and my heart sought to know and to search out and to seek wisdom and the scheme of things, and to know that wickedness is stupidity and that foolishness is madness. Comment in verse 23, he said, I'll be wise, but it was far from him. It turned out that wisdom was too complex to catalog it all. Life's exceedingly deep, and the understanding of it is far off. But in verse 25, I didn't come to that conclusion quickly or cheaply. I tried to catalog wisdom with all my might. Oh, how I tried, but I couldn't get all the way there. We would say to Solomon that he went a long way, but understandably God doesn't make anyone all wise. Now, a very interesting remark about romance, verse 26. I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and traps, whose hands are chains. Whoever pleases God shall escape from her, but the sinner will be ensnared by her. He says there are women out there on the hunt, and they're good at it. A man will escape that kind only by the grace of God. If God is pleased with you, he'll deliver you, but if you're a sinner, he'll let you be trapped. Verse 27. Behold, I found this, says the preacher, to one another, to find out the scheme which my soul seeks, but I have not found. I found one man among 1,000, but I've not found a woman among all those. Behold, I've only found this, that God made man upright, but they search for many schemes. He says in verses 27 and 29 that in his quest for wisdom, he hasn't found the all-encompassing answers yet, but he learned this, that those who have it being either all-encompassing wisdom or uprightness, there's only one man in 1,000 like that. And as far as women who are on that level, he hasn't seen one yet. Not to say they don't exist, but he hasn't found one yet. In verse 29, he's only found that God made man upright, but man searches for many schemes. Maybe that's to the effect God made man upright and wise, but man descends into unrighteousness and loses his wisdom. He winds up groping for answers that would be obvious to him if he weren't so dull in his unrighteousness. Ecclesiastes 8 is next.